Hello, my name is Sophie and welcome back to my channel. I've mentioned a few times on here that I have a book club with my husband. I usually use inverted commas because it's not much of a book club and I'm the only one that really participates. But the premise is, and you can tell this is rehearsed because it feels like a script and I know it off by heart, when we got married we asked our guests to gift us a copy of their favourite book to have, so we could have a little library of our favourite people's favourite books, and in an endeavour to read them all I set up a book club where we take it in turns each month to choose a book from the wedding library, and generally I read it and he doesn't. As we reach the end of the second year of having this book club, we have 12 more books that have been selected and 10 other books that I have also read. So I thought I'd talk you through everything I read this year as part of the wedding book club. You can already see the top of the stack. So I started in January with a pick from one of my bridesmaids who at the time was 10, I think, and she chose the book Murder Most... Why are we not in focus? She chose the book Murder Most Unladylike by Robin Stevens. This is a whole middle grade crime series of two private school, boarding school girls. I believe they're early secondary school, so maybe 13, 14 years old, and they go around solving mysteries at their school. Or at least they did in this book. There's a whole series, and honestly, if I didn't have such a long TBR, I would genuinely consider getting the rest of this series because it was a really nice, easy read, but it was genuinely really engaging as well. It's one of these middle grade books that wasn't dumbed down for the sake of being middle grade. It was just a genuinely well-written book that is more of a middle grade and up. I genuinely think this is a book that can be enjoyed by people much older than middle grade readers, but also by middle grade readers, and I think being able to write something that good takes a lot of skill. So I really enjoyed this and it was a great way to start the year. I've read 65 books total this year, so a good third of them have been my book club books, which I suppose is a good thing. I rate this one 4 stars, and yeah, really nicely written, really nicely paced. I genuinely recommend. Then I read Revolution by Jennifer Donnelly, which was from one of my old school friends. I was really pleasantly surprised by this book. It gives romance vibes. To me that cover screams romance vibes, and arguably it's kind of a contemporary historical dual timeline. It's a really interesting story that I don't know if I can summarise very well. I think it has a really good teenage narrative voice where the teenager has all these big, messy, complex emotions, but it's not written in a really melodramatic way. It's not written in a way that belittles or minimises the reality of those feelings and emotions for the teenager. It similarly doesn't make them so mature that they're just an adult who is technically aged at 17. I really liked this. I really liked the historical elements. I thought it was really interesting. This is one that I listened to as an audiobook, and a lot of this book takes place in France, and the audiobook narrator did a much better French accent than I could ever do, especially in my own brain voice. So being able to hear a lot of the pronunciations of the place names and the people names said authentically definitely made it a more immersive experience. I didn't love the ending, which is why I rated it 4 stars instead of 5, but I really enjoyed this book, and I thought it was very of the time. I think it's one that was published in 2010 or 2011, which is when I was a teenager. 2010, which is when I was a teenager, so it makes sense that I enjoyed the representation of teenagers from this time period. But I thought this was brilliantly written, and I do again thoroughly recommend. Then in March, though I didn't finish it until April, I read The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is one that was I was going to say double-edged sword, but that makes it sound bad. This is one that I called a productive read because it's a book that either I chose or my husband, I genuinely can't remember. I think Lucas chose this one as part of the wedding book club, but I had also chosen it for my 24 and 2024 list because I have another copy. I think it came from my nan's collection, so I do have 2 copies of this book, but it ticked 2 boxes, which makes me very happy. I really enjoyed this. I rated it 4 stars. This is another one I listened to as an audiobook, and I cannot more wholeheartedly recommend listening to the audiobook by Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis plays Gollum in the movies, but also he is just a fantastic actor. He really full-bodied encompassed all of the characters. He did all the voices, he sang all the songs, and I genuinely think he is the perfect person to narrate these books. I feel like it is an extension of how Tolkien intended these to be told. Genuinely really fantastic narration, and yeah, I rated it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It wasn't my favourite fantasy book. I didn't realise how much of a children's book it would be. I don't know why, it never really crossed my mind that it's a classic children's or / young adult book. It's definitely one that can be enjoyed by all ages, but yeah, it almost feels like it has an almost nursery rhyme feel to it at times. But yeah, really enjoyed it, and hoping to read the Lord of the Rings series at some point in the near future. Do I own those books? No, but maybe one day. Then the next book I read is called The Player of Games by Ian M. Banks. This is book 2 in a series called The Culture, and it's quite a heavy sci-fi series. But this came from one of Lucas's work friends / someone he knew from school, and he wrote, this book is part 2 in a very long series, but sometimes it's better not to start at the beginning. And I agree that this can just about be read as a standalone, but I rated it 3 stars, and I genuinely think I would have rated it higher if I had the context, the full context of the series. I have since picked up book 1 because I was in a second-hand bookshop at the beginning of November, at the end of November, and I found it second-hand, so it just felt kind of like fate. But I did enjoy this, and it reminded me that I do like science fiction. I don't know if this is my favourite kind of science fiction, because it very much, to me, it felt like it was telling me things rather than showing me things. I didn't feel particularly emotionally connected to the character. It was fine. I think if I'd had the full context, perhaps some of the reveals between the aliens and the robots and all of that would have felt more hard-hitting. But it's not a series I'm giving up on, so I think I will reread this if and when I ever get around to reading book 1. Then the next book ended up being part of a string of 4 back-to-back 5-star reads. This is a book that my cousin's partner gave to us, I think, and that is The Kite Runner by Carla Tocini. And this is a book I've been meaning to read for a really long time. I also had it in my own personal collection as well as the wedding library, but yeah, like I said, I rated this 5 stars, and this was a 5-star rating that was not necessarily because I super duper enjoyed it, which I did, but I enjoyed it in the way that only in the way that you can enjoy a book that's really hard to read. It's one of those books that earns every single star rating it's got. It's such an important read. It's such an important narrative perspective that so many people will never have encountered before, including myself. This is another one I listen to as an audiobook, especially because it is more literary. I don't generally find literary books particularly easy to read, but it's narrated by the author, and I think that really helped to understand the story in the way that he intended it to be told. I fully appreciate that some of the issues that some people have with audiobooks is that it takes the element of reader's perception out of reading, because it forces you to listen to a book in a certain way rather than interpreting it in your own way. But I think for this book that actually really aids the message that the book is trying to give, and it was just fantastic, genuinely. It's one of those books that just takes your breath away. Really, really important read, and I'm really glad that I was forced / given the opportunity to read it, because I don't know if I would have read it off my own back, if I'm being honest. Moving on to the June book, which again I finished in July. I don't know if I finished many, if any, of my book club books in the right month, but this one is a very different book. It's a non-fiction book called A Sense of Freedom by Jimmy Boyle. Jimmy Boyle was a renowned criminal in Scotland, and this is his autobiography of his life and his upbringing up to the point where he was in prison in the 70s. The book doesn't end with his release, spoiler, but it was a really interesting read. It's one that made me really think. It also made me think about the formatting, because this was a book that my uncle gave me, and it's his copy that was published in the 70s, so it's quite an old book. It's been kept very well, but it's interesting to look at the formatting, that it's very dense. I don't know how well you can see, but there's a lot of words per page. So this book actually took me over a month to finish. I'd be reading it and I'd feel like I'd really made a good dent. You know, I'd read 20-30 pages, and then it turns out I'd read 10. So even though I enjoyed the narrative style, I enjoyed the writing style, I was genuinely enjoying reading about this man's life from his own perspective rather than perhaps the different perspective of him that was portrayed in the media at the time. But it just took me so long to read, and for a book that was only just over 200 pages, oh no, okay, it was significantly over 200 pages, 264 pages, but normally a 264 page book would only take me like a week to read, and this took me nearly 5. But yeah, it's like I can't quite figure out what that says about my opinion of the book. I've put it in on Storygraph as 3 stars, but I don't feel like this is the kind of non-fiction that you can rate. I think the only reason I gave it 3 stars is because by the end I was bored of not finishing it, not because I was bored of the narrative, but I was bored of how long it was taking me. Yeah, in hindsight I think I'd rescind that rating and leave it unrated, because I think especially for someone's memoir it's hard to give a rating. But again, it's another book that I would never have read off my own back. So that's one of my favourite things about the library, is that it makes me as much as you can make anyone read anything when they're choosing to read, but it's giving me the opportunity to read books I never would have picked myself. So this was insightful, if nothing else. Then for the July book club book, I actually did finish this one in July, and I rated it 2 stars because I didn't love it, and that was The Thin Executioner by Darren Shan. This is a book that has huge font, and I feel like it was missing 3 chapters at the beginning that actually introduced the main character and gave me a reason to care about him, because you go through over 500 pages, over 400 pages of story with this guy, but at no point did I really feel like I actually cared about whether he succeeded in his journey. He just sounded like a whiny teenage boy, and that's because he mostly was a whiny teenage boy. The pacing was very odd. It was really slow throughout the middle, and then the last kind of 5 to 10% kind of lumped loads of information in there, and I was really confused. I didn't grow up reading Darren Shan, so perhaps there's an element of nostalgia that other people would feel for this book that I didn't feel because I haven't read Darren Shan before. But I wasn't a fan of this one. And from 2 stars to another 5 stars, this is more of a modern classic, but definitely one I should have read as a child, and I definitely didn't. The Book Thief by Marcus Cusack. I really enjoyed this book. I'm fascinated by World War II, and I really should read more historical fiction, but I just don't. This is one that was published in 2005, but it was really popular when I was young. Not that in 2005 I was 9, so I was perhaps a bit young to be reading it then, considering it's classified as YA rather than children's or middle grade. But I think it's another really interesting insight on the war from inside of Germany, and the fact that the whole book is narrated by death. It's just really cleverly written. I really enjoyed this one, and it's one of those that kind of sticks in your brain, and then you think about it, and then you think of something else that happens, and you think about it a little bit more, and it just wiggles its way in there and stays there. I can totally understand why this is a modern classic. It's a really thought-provoking book, and another one that I would thoroughly recommend. 5 stars. And then the last 4 books are a little bit different and take a little bit more explanation. So the book that Luke has picked for September is The Forest of Doom by Ian Livingstone, and this is a book that isn't really a book. It's a choose your own adventure story that feels a little bit like scaled down D&D. You do need some dice, you get to roll dice, you get to play the game, but it's not as involved as D&D. I didn't put this on my Storygraph because it is a choose your own adventure. You don't necessarily read every page. I don't know why the focus is there we go. You don't necessarily read every page, so I haven't read the book cover to cover because it wouldn't make sense. We did play one game of this and we didn't win, so we need to play it again, but that was our September pick, so I'm counting it as read in terms of the book club, but I didn't put it on Storygraph. It was really fun though. We do want to play it again. It was a really nice, we had a little at-home date afternoon where we just, you know, we got some dice and we played through this game. I've bought another one of the books in this series to take to my siblings for Christmas, because I think it'll be a nice thing to do over the Christmas holidays. But yeah, this was really fun, and it's opened my eyes to D&D-esque choose your own adventure book games. October is when I started choosing the book club books based exclusively on the fact that on my book spreadsheet, if I pick the book that's right at the bottom of the list, I don't have to readjust the rest of the list and move everything up. So I picked the book that was at the bottom purely because it was at the bottom. And that book was Myths and Legends by, I think it was collated by Philip Wilkinson. This is a non-fiction book. I don't want to call it a picture book, but it has pictures. But it's one of these quite dense non-fiction books that has really tiny font, and oh, my bookmark came out. It has really tiny font, and every double page spread is on a different topic within the subject of Myths and Legends. And I started reading it, and it's one of those that you can't really read in one sitting. It's something you kind of dip in and out of, and I found it a little bit too intimidating to dip back into. So I think I got 70 odd pages in to this 300 page book, and I need to read some more of it because I really would like to finish it before the end of the year. So I haven't technically finished the October pick, but the pick was Myths and Legends by Philip Wilkinson. For the November pick, what my husband and I have decided to do, because November is our anniversary month, we've decided that rather than picking a book from the library, we will choose together a new book to add to the library, because we think this will be a nice tradition to keep on moving forward. Even when I've read everything that's in the library, it's a way that we can kind of keep it up to date. And the book that we chose this year is The Delegate Dream Department Store by Mai Lee. We had quite a long trip to Waterstones, and this is the book that we were both particularly interested in. I read it straight away, pretty much, and I rated it 3 stars. I thought it was fine. It gave me very whimsical Inside Out vibes, but I didn't love it. It felt like it had a very middle grade writing style, even though it's technically an adult literary book. I really liked the concept, but I didn't love the execution because I didn't feel connected to the characters in any way, shape or form. I think I'm quite a character driven reader, and I need to be made to care about the characters. And whilst there is a main character, I wouldn't say that she's the main part of the story. So all round, I just think, especially because this is literary, and like I said, I struggle a little bit with literary fiction, I think perhaps I just didn't really get what this book was trying to do. My husband is currently reading it. I think he's enjoying it more than I am. But it was a fun read. I had a nice time. The cover is stunning. I'm glad we read it and have added it to our collection, but it definitely wasn't my favourite from the list for this year. So that was November. Yeah, we are at the point where you can just about see the stack again. So last but by no means least, Lucas chose the book for December, and I'm pretty sure he just tried to pick the shortest book that I hadn't already read. So he picked another choice from my uncle, and he gave us Midnight Express by Billy Hayes with William Hoffer. This is another book about a man who was sent to prison. Don't know what it is about my uncle and his criminal biographies, but this man was caught trying to smuggle hashish out of Istanbul in Turkey, and he was sentenced to 30 years in Turkish jail, and it's all about his story, how he escaped, and his experiences in the prison system in a different country. I'm currently nearly 80 pages into it. I've not finished it yet. I'm currently reading it, but I do actually really like the narrative style. I think it's really well written. So those are the 12 books we picked for the book club books. As a subsidiary of that, the fun thing about having this as our wedding gift thing is that people interpreted it in lots of different ways. 2 of those books were from my uncle, so both my uncle and my aunt gave us 3 books each, generally in kind of different genres. Most people gave us 1 book, but my mum interpreted it in that she gave us 3 books, one that she enjoyed in her past, one that shaped her in her present, and one that was to set us up for the future. So for the future, she gave us a Delia Smith Christmas cooking book, which was actually a wedding gift that she got on her wedding day. So it's a book that's been in my family for a long time, and that I'm really, really pleased that she chose to give it to us. That was really, really special. The book that she gave us that shaped her present is Shogun by James Clavell. I know they've just made a series of it on Disney Plus, and I kind of want to watch it, but I want to read the book first. But the book is really chunky, so I need to be in the right frame of mind to read that one. And then the book from her past is that she gave us a box set of Famous 5 books because they were her favourite books growing up. And rather than trying to read 10 Famous 5 books back to back, I set myself the challenge of trying to read one a month, and it took me till November, but I read all 10 books. Generally, I rated this book series 3 stars. I thought they were fine. I think they are, in the way that I described Murder Most Unladylike as a middle grade book that can be read by middle grade readers and above, and I think it can be enjoyed by people of all ages. This is a series that I think is a children's series of its time and perhaps wouldn't be enjoyed as much by generations to come. But similarly, I am an adult reading children's books, so I don't know if perhaps I would have got more enjoyment from reading these with a child. So, you know, not my favourite series, but not my least favourite series. 3 stars is still a good rating from me, and it took me 11 months to read 10 books. So all round, I'm very pleased I've got through this series. I feel very accomplished to have actually finished it. It wasn't the least enjoyable book I've read, not even the least enjoyable book on this list. So yeah, I'm glad to have been able to tick 10 extra books off the Wedding Library list this year. So those are the 22 books that I have read / am reading for the book club this year. I'm not anticipating that I'm going to be able to read that many next year. I'm not doing any subsidiary reading challenges of any other series because there's one other series in the library collection, but I think I need a break, having been thinking about Famous 5 for the entirety of this year. Next year I'm just going to go back down to 1 a month, so in theory next year should only be the 11 books that are already in the collection and the 1 new edition in November. But that's everything I have read or am reading for the book club this year. If you've read any of these books, please do let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're reading a great book, whether it's one of these or something else. And I'll see you very soon for another bookish video. Bye!